The agenda for Strategy Programmes Committee on 17th of February 2023. Valerie, can you have a wee quick run round, because I know this is streaming for who is in the room and who is wearing line. Thank you.
Good morning, members. We will start with those who are in the room. We have Councillor Moyer as chair, Councillor Donald Reid, Councillor Stephen. If you're online, could I ask you to mute? There's a bit of background noise somewhere.
While you're watching the dishes.
It was on 3 of going up north.
I will now just check who is actually online. George Hazel. Councillor Lennox. Councillor Lennox, an apology. Councillor Sinter.
Present.
Ed McGrattan. Thank you. Andrew Walters.
Hi.
Mark Horsham.
Hello.
Anne Foley. I think I've got Anne. Councillor Mearns.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Mitchell, can you just confirm you're actually online?
I can see them.
And I think that is difficult. So we have apologies this morning from William Lennox, Owen O'Donnell, and Lawrence Neal is having technical problems and we'll try and get in. He's having his own authority. Are there any other apologies that I'm not aware of?
Townsend as well, yeah.
Is Duncan Townsend on the online?
So you've done the apologies and okay, moving on to declarations of interest. Just again, just standard declaration from myself in terms of Strawberry Bank Asliff. Is there anybody else got any apologies, any indications online? George, you usually got a declaration.
There might be an extension, but at the minute the contract's come to an end.
Just trying to help, but there we are. Sure. It's thanks, yeah. Okay, any other declaration of interest? No. Okay, moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 25th of November, and that is in page 25. That's 25th of November, that's page 26. So going to the first page, on the big page number 2, in terms of accuracy, any issues in terms of accuracy, page 2, no. 3, no. Big page 4, no. And lastly, big page 5, no.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yeah, who's? Councillor Mills, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. No, it was just to point out that the last minutes and the last report on the bus strategy noted that there would be a report coming to this committee, but I see that there is no report on that at this committee, so I just wanted to raise it now if that's helpful, and or ask when we will see that. Thank you.
Just for purposes of the accuracy, so that we're okay with a minute, in terms of matters arising and anticipating that as being a matters arising, I do believe it will be captured within the agenda of the body of the report when it's Bruce's turn to give us an update on that, if that helps. Is that okay?
Okay, so we're agreeing to include some sort of a verbal update in this committee on that, because it's not noted on the paper.
It's under the report later on, one of the agenda items, there's a specific list of whole raft of things that Bruce and his department cover, and that is certainly one of the areas that they're saying. That's not voted. all the time. So definitely, it's definitely not been in any way lost off the radar. So pick it up there.
Thank you.
So anything else on the matter horizon? I've got this little bit. No? Okay, and I see Duncan Townsend is the principal tax, is it right? Right, okay, so that's the grade. Moving on to the draft, I did like the fourth draft revenue budget for 2023, 2024 and long-term strategy financial. Term financial strategy, that's between 7 and 56, and the recommendation is on page 15. Neil, do you wish to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So as you've noted, the draft revenue budget and long-term financial strategy, it's a paper making proposals really in support of SPT's short and long-term objectives and aspirations. As ever in a budget case, particularly around the long-term financial strategy, for a lot of detail, there's actually a lot of moving parts, right? And that's why the paper is only 50 pages long, including the appendices. But what I'll do is I'll cover the three key themes through the paper, let's say what I think are the main issues for us to consider. So first of all, in terms of section 2, the background, which is really the context. Four building blocks for us are, and one of the really fundamental ones for us, the excellent recovery we've had in both March and income and subway. Secondly, we've got, as noted at the bottom of page 7, we get an agreed requisition formula for the builders and elections in our areas, where we receive the average adjustment to local government settlement across Scotland. As well as that, and the negative side is everyone's aware, we're in a period of high inflation, so that's going to impact us board, that includes employee costs, that includes cost operator costs, and really all other contracting costs. It's also important to note, it's at the bottom of page 8, there's a really tight connection within SPT between our revenue funding and our capital position, and there's a couple of key issues for us in there. We need to continue to support subway modernisation, obviously, and we're in that period now where we're supporting both and revenue costs, both maintenance of old and new systems, and that's important for us. We also need to continue to support traffic investment across the SPT area, particularly in conjunction with partnership with our local authority partners. And also what we're looking to the future is planning to scale SPT2 measures. So if I can then move on to the current position on page 9. As noted, there is an agreed requisition formula. The position at the moment is that's an increase of 1.95%. Now that's subject to the final Scottish budget settlement. That has changed in previous years, so 1.95% is the working position at the moment. That increase is welcome, but again, as everyone is aware, that's an increase at the point in time where we've got double-digit inflation. So welcome, but there's still challenges to be met. And on the inflationary pressures, which we are forecasting to be quite severe in 2023-24. Notably in employee costs in terms of the compounding element, especially in terms of wage inflation. Electricity is noted in the paper for 23-24 with a forecast increase of 59%. That moves to a compounding increase of 113% in the following year. So given that we have a subway which runs in electricity, that's an unavoidable cost increase for them. Bus costs, we've noted in the paper, we're experiencing some severe inflation there. Our last set of papers, which went to operations a couple of weeks ago, we had an increase of 142% in those sets of papers. And finally, all other contracting costs, really most of our contracts will be CPI factors on. CPI is, we know, depending on the time contracts engage, CPI can be anywhere between last year to 7 to 10 and above that percent. So severe and pressures on inflation. We do have, as I've mentioned already, a positive mitigation from two areas, but one in particular, subway incomes are strongly. We're forecasting that recovery to be sustained in the 23-24, which is really important for my position. Also, in terms of interest received, that's been boosted quite substantially by the increase in base rates. That's good, it's very helpful because it's a really good mitigation against the other factors in the economy. It's not expected to be sustained beyond the short to medium term, so it's not something that sustains through the long-term financial strategy. So the last two areas to note again are the connection to the capital programme and the last two bullets on page 11. So it's difficult to sustain the capital programme for 15 million. We did have a historic precedence of 3 years of 25 million, and we still struggle against being trying to maintain a programme of 15 million. 15 million in a period of high inflation, very difficult. Meet the aspirations across the whole SPT area. So we are proposing to support the programmes we have in previous years through revenue. Similarly, for survey modernisation, there's a change in the phasing of the funding from government, still within the 256 million funding envelope. But so again, we propose to support directly the modernisation in 23-24 from revenue. So together with the proposed increases to fares, fees and charges that we're going to amend, that all result in a balanced budget for 23-24. So if I then move on to the fares, fees and charges, which are listed out in the tables on pages 12 to 13, it's proposed to increase survey fares January 24 and average increase of 3%. Effectively, it's the increase which was planned to happen in January 23, which the partnership agreed was in December 22. And that will provide us welcome increase in income for SPT, but it will also provide a full year's benefit to passengers of that pause, which was agreed by the partnership. And it will also, for January 24, it will also align with the historic date for heavy rail increases across the UK. So for parking charges, which is in the bottom half of the table there, page 13, it's proposed to increase parking charges to be closer to the comparative charges in the area. Finally, you'll see in the last para under fares, fees and charges, we're proposing to increase parking charges to bus stations, first increase since 2019. We do have an agreement in there that is based on CPI, but recognising the pressures that are affecting operators as well as ourselves, we propose to limit that to 3%. Which is aligned to the maximum increase that we can apply to our contracts with bus operators. Last area to cover, and a really important one, is the long-term financial strategy in section 5. This has been reviewed and updated for the first time in 3 years, and that's because of the impact of COVID, and the positive review that was agreed both with the partnership and with our previous external auditors. So it's being reviewed for current circumstances and also for future plans. The key issues in there are, number one, absolutely, we continue to offer services as we do at the moment. Number two is that we deliver survey modernisation through to the end. And number three, really importantly for us, is support developments arising from the Transport Act 2019 and also from the STPR2. I mentioned at the start, a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts in the 10-year long-term financial strategy. And the key assumptions for that are listed in page 43. Now, naturally, there's more confidence in the early years in that long-term financial strategy. And you see that through years 1 to 6, we're in a balanced position, but then with a deficit forecast beyond that. If these assumptions prove to be correct, then we will need to take specific action before we hit year 7. But there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts in there, and we could hope that that will not come to fruition at that point. Final thing in the detail of the paper relates to reserves, and a really important proposal in there, I believe, in that we are asking for approval to reclassify the existing guideline criteria reserve to a Transport Future Investment Fund. The purpose of that fund would be in supporting in the short and in the longer term measures arising from the Transport Act and also from STPR2. Last point on reserves, and it's noted in page 47, and again I think this is a really important point. It shows that projected movement of reserves with substantial reduction forecast. That's actually a positive reduction forecast in the nature, applying the reserves in the nature that they were intended for. That would be on the basis of delivery survey modernisation, continued delivery investment in the survey infrastructure, and importantly, in utilising the future transport investment fund over that period. So, in conclusion, Chair, I hope this is a positive paper actually, taking account of the current pressures, but also the fact that we do have some current successes to build on. It supports transport investment, which is fundamental to our organisations like SPT through our capital programme and partnership with local authority partners, and it also plans to support future transport investment through the planned utilisation of reserves over the period of long-term financial strategy, using them for the purpose that they were created. So if I can ask the committee to agree to the 5 actions which are in section 7, and I'm happy to take questions, Chair, on either the themes or the detail of the report.
Thanks, Neil. If I can maybe ask, I don't know where Neil Valley or Bristol, a combination of all, because there is a hell of a lot of detail and information in here, but one of the areas certainly that myself and the chairs, I'm kind of keen to kind of identify and highlight here is the part that you made reference to in section 5 in terms of the Transport Future Investment Fund. And obviously there, and that has been obviously identified, it's £10 million I think that's pretty significant in terms of an indication in terms of a body, in terms of, real intent, in terms of going forward. I'm just wondering if the officer maybe want to add, maybe on first issue would be fine, but anybody got any additional comments, observation on it? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe just make here at this stage, looking ahead in looking at the long-term financial strategy, Neil and the team have looked ahead at the priorities of the organisation. One of the priorities, as we've discussed many times, is looking about how we solve some of the challenges of transport, looking ahead, particularly the Transport Act. Now we know to actually do any of the work on the Transport Act options is going to take significant sums of money. But if we use how others have done it as examples of how much it's actually cost them to progress some of that, we are not funded to do that other than taking it from our subsidised budget at the moment. So we have established a fund to allow us to actually do that work for the future. And so Neil's quite right, it's a positive reserve, it's a positive reserve in that I would expect it to be drawn down as that work carries on to get to a solution. If we use, we clearly talked a lot of the transport organisations throughout the UK. I think the last time I saw Manchester were looking at a bill of up to £50 million to actually get to a decision. So we have to put in place resources to allow us to do that work. And that's for the purpose of the fund, but also to look at how we would actually implement some of these two proposals. Much of the work that we do, and it's referenced in the next paper on the metro update, a lot of that work comes from a revenue resource, that's not capital work. To actually do feasibility works and assessments and optioneering is revenue, and therefore we need to make scope for that within our budget. Otherwise, those projects are never going to get to fruition. You don't have the funding to do the first bit, to spend the capital. So that's part of that.
Thanks, Alan. Bruce, on.
I'll just emphasise, as Barry Neil have said, it's prudent and precautionary budgeting, really, based on what we are seeing from the regional transport strategy. I think just to add what the guys have said, and members who were at the engagement session we held last Friday, about the metro and strategy, bus that really good session. We're going to take great depth there. So remember, I had a bullet point there that said process. And after that, another bullet point that said process again, just to emphasise we will go through a process to make sure that this is robust and objectively evidence-based as possible in terms of considering whatever happens with bus in the future, whether that's the Transport Act 2019 or anything in between. So Neil, Barry, finance guys are absolutely spot on in making sure that whatever happens, we have that funding in place. It is hugely challenging, as you've heard from Gordon and the operational guys over the last few months. It's not getting any better, and that's something that we're very much focused on trying to address. So I'll talk more about the regional bus strategy later on.
Yeah. Is anybody else on that point? Yeah. Neil, just to close this.
Yeah.
No, I see.
If I can just say, hopefully it's obvious what this is not. This is not a definition of what the outcomes are or will be. This is creating financial room to actually identify taking it through to the point where they can be delivered. And some of those, actually quite a lot of those delivery will be in the capital programme, but you've got to get to a point where they're actually defined a real project. And the experience that Barry said in England, this is a scarily expensive thing to do. And we cannot do with our existing resources. It will not be done for an annual revenue budget. We need to create room. And that's what this is. It's a financial plan to create room.
Okay. Thanks, Neil. Bruce. Kirsty.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Neil and others, for all the work that's gone in and for the report. Finance still something that it takes me a while to wrap my head around, but it all seems very reasonable to me. The the one thing that I did want to ask about, which maybe doesn't come as a huge surprise, was the Transport Future Investment Fund, and really delighted to see there's earmarked funding in place to take forward some of that big work to look at some of the options within the Transport Scotland Act. I believe it's still the case that the provision for municipal bus ownership is the provision at the moment that we can take forward, at least because there are guidelines in place for that, unlike some of the other ones. So I was just wanting to ask a little bit more information on that specifically. Will that provision be explored within a feasibility study in the first instance, and will this funding that's been reserved be enough to take forward that work, business case feasibility study? And secondary to that, will there be an option to do that work, for example, in conjunction with Glasgow City Council, for example, because we know that they're also wanting to embark on a similar project, and if we can do that work jointly, it would seem that that could be a good outcome for any information that could come out of that study, and also in terms of cost.
Yeah, I see Duncan is on as well. I'll take Duncan. Do you want to come in this one? Is that on what the same subject?
No, I'll wait.
Bruce, I think he started on the answer earlier on, but
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor Mills, for the question. So, you know, the provisions of the 2019 Act will, holistically, as part of the Strathclyde Regional Bus Strategy, and it was we're hearing the paper back in November to the committee, really laid out in detail what our process for that would be and the scope of it. One of the key things in there, as I say, people on about the process, but it's hugely important. You are talking about a huge market in the west of Scotland. One of the key things in there will be, as we go through that process, looking at operation and funding models for the future, and that will be covered as part of the SRBS work, and that will reflect what we're getting out of the strategies that's going on. We'll make no prejudged decisions about which way we're going to go. As I've said before, we can't do that. It would be right, it would be remiss of us to come to yourselves and recommend anything like that without going through due process. So the operational and funding model that we believe is right will come through the Strathclyde Bus Strategy process. And just to point out, working with Glasgow City Council, we will be working with all councils in the west of Scotland. I can absolutely assure you to take this forward. This is, I've said many times, it's not something to be taken lightly, and it will require support, it will require input, quite significant input from each of our councils. None of them are the same. They're facing very different issues. Glasgow's facing a series of issues very different to East Ayrshire, South Ayrshire, and the rural parts of South Lanarkshire, for example. And there may be different solutions for each of those. So absolutely we'll be working closely with the councils as we go on. Thanks.
thanks, Bruce. Tom Nixon is, I think, right.
Thanks, Justice. On one point, Councillor May, raised there, we reported this to the partnership previously. There's been no guidance issued in respect to the municipal operation. There was an information note issued by the Scottish Government with no guidance on how that measure is to be taken forward. So just to clarify that.
Yeah, so just, I mean, I think, fellow chairs, one very point, in terms of correspondence on that issue, in terms of getting clarity on, giving us steers, so officers are basically not working in the dark and taking them pot shots in the dark. They're actually working on some kind of framed structure and guidance from the Scottish Government. That's something that, there's an element of deep frustration for us all. And some of the comments that Kirsty made reference to in terms of ambition, I think quite a lot, if not most of us, share the view that we want to see a better setup. But the problem we've got is in terms of frustration, particularly some of us who have been around for a wee bit longer than others, is obviously getting that information by the, that over and above the issue about, the regulation in the first place. Obviously, we're talking about 23, 4 years down the line, we're still seeking guidance, so we can take it forward, in relation to, what we're looking at, what we're looking at in terms of financing, and what we as an organisation, which I see, is well placed and should be well placed to be assisting the delivery of the bus service in Strathclyde. Anybody else? David?
Yeah, just a question for Neil. As we put money into this bus development fund and it grows, in terms of the spending of that fund, will that be totally within our compass? Do we need to refer the spend there to anybody else, or can we do it ourselves?
Neil?
Not looking at our compass, Chair, but within, following the strategy and the process that Bruce has outlined.
Thank you.
Duncan?
So can I just clarify something there? It's not a bus development fund, it's a future transport investment fund, so it covers lots of different things. I think we have to be doing that, it's not a single route.
That was just prioritising.
Duncan?
Thank you. I was like make sure everyone was finished there. My question's from a different perspective. Obviously, I'm from South Ayrshire. I represent the views of the people there, and this is a very Glasgow-centric budget by the looks of things. But the one thing that does stand out for me is for people travelling from Ayrshire, East Ayrshire, North Ayrshire, they'll be travelling into town and using the park and ride facilities. It's an increase of £2 to park for a day. If they want a season ticket, they're looking for an extra £220 on top of all the other pressures. I'm just wondering, in the history of raising prices, has it ever actually increased footfall or decreased footfall?
Neil, for you? Duncan, could you just repeat the last bit, please? We just missed that, if you don't mind, thanks.
Sorry, it's really just a question on increasing the prices, obviously to make some more money, but I'm concerned that it will turn people away from actually using the park and ride system, so it might work out to be a loss. So I'm just wondering, has there been a study done on this, and whether or not they believe that increasing prices will actually sustain the footfall that they've got just now?
Yeah, yes, there has. I mean, one of the key things in this is actually when we look at subway fares as well, generally, is we look at the comparative fares and comparative routes, and certainly we look at comparative car parks and similar locations to our car parks, and yes, the fares increase we've got in there, we remain very competitive. So we do not expect to have any substantial, or indeed we're not actually expecting to have a drop off in terms of pass rates because of that.
Duncan, you want to come back in, or are you happy with that answer?
I'll accept the answer for now, but obviously after the prices have been increased, I'd like to see if the study has shown any marked decrease or sustainability in it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can also say, Councillor, I mean, apologies if it comes across as the Glasgow central budget. It's difficult when you're looking at SPT's financial position, when the subway forms quite a substantial part of that, where you're not talking about something which is in the Glasgow environment. But I'll pick up what Bruce has said. Everything we're talking about in terms of the Future Transport Investment Fund is for the Strathclyde area. And it is not at all framed or designed to be around Glasgow.
Oh no, I definitely understand that, and I know where the biggest part of the budget comes from. But it's still from that perspective, that's what it was. The only thing I'll barge you for is a bus sign in Simonton, and I'll leave you alone for the rest of the year.
Extremely cheap. Okay, Ed.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, actually, Duncan has asked a similar question to me. I was really interested in the fact of what the research is to come up with a figure for this. I wasn't specifically looking at the parking issues of parking charges for people who are travelling a long way into the city. It was more just the basic subway ticket charge. I mean, look, it is a fairly modest increase, and in fact, I guess my question was, do we know what the break point is where an increase in fare charges then generates a a reduction in patronage? You know, is there research out there? And I think the answer was probably yes, and you're doing that. But you know, it is actually very modest, and considering it was 2019 was the last increase, and this won't come into effect until January 24, which is, I mean, that's a 5-year period. I mean, I know we're always worried about you know, pennies in the pocket and such like, but if you're dealing over that period and the inflation that's been going on in that period, is it too modest? Is my question.
Yeah, I'm quite up, Jeff. Thanks. Thanks, Dave. The question you're asking around about the subway fares themselves, we do the analysis compared to other transport, whether our competitors, other transport routes, whether it be West End to City Centre, South Side to City Centre, and that's rail and bus, to look at the comparative charges, and we remain very competitive in that sense as well. In relation to resistance, there has been resistance historically, but that's been one of our bad scenarios where we've made significant increases in one go, not where we've had modest increases. Our ideal solution would be for all these charges that we would increase them commensurate to our costs on a regular basis, but a small basis. So that's one of the factors behind looking for a small increase here. We're not wanting to choke off any of the excellent recovery we've got in something. So for what the increase brings us, it's more about what the baseline is rather than the direct impact in 23-24. We need to make sure that the baseline is following the cost base. So in answer to your question, do we expect resistance from these modest increases? No. If we've gone for significant increase trying to catch up, for example, what we might have increased over the last 3 or 4 years of COVID that happened, then has to be said we would probably have resistance and loss of customers. So that's the background in terms of the experience and inflation.
Neil, could I decide whether it's yourself, Neil, or Valley? Obviously, we have made a long way in our trams in relation to the under 22s, and obviously that is something that's very much part of the mix, which is still a key. It's been monitored, but in terms of consequentials, just wondering if there's any kind of comment yourself or Valley for the meeting.
2 things. One in terms of the impact of subway. We did have a slide that under 220 passengers, which was reported to the Ops Committee a couple of weeks ago. That's not been sustained through January, I want to say. So it looks as though it was just a blip. So actually, over the year, we've not lost under 22 passengers, which is excellent. In relation to the wider point, Transport Scotland are now, their position is now that they are in review mode in terms of under 22, the impact overall. So whilst we continue to be the case for support to subway, the 2 things are we're not seeing a direct financial impact at this point. And the second thing is Transport Scotland are now reviewing what the impacts are, and we'll feed into that.
Okay, I report develops that in the future. Ed, are you sorry, you okay with that answer yet?
Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you for that.
Okay. Just a hand back up.
Thank you, Chair. So it was just one very last thing that I noticed that on the table on page 9, I think it is, that shows the local authority spend on public transport, and that obviously that's gone down over the years. But it was just to highlight, it is inflation is mentioned in the report underneath that, but just whether future tables could include the proportion based on inflation to show that that's actually worse than what we're seeing on the table. You know, it looks like it's gone down a bit, but actually if you take into account inflation, it's gone down a hell of a lot more. And it'd be really helpful, I think, to illustrate just how bad it is in terms of funding going down when you take into account inflation, if that could be somehow illustrated within the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Can bring that in. The impact for us on a cumulative basis is in the double-digit millions of pounds. And actually, it wasn't our previous budget papers. We just simplified this budget paper to take it out. We can happy add that back in. It amplifies the position. I'm sure everybody is aware that we're in a really difficult position with inflation. And even in previous years where it was low, there's still quite a significant compounded effect in a negative way.
Okay, Christian. Anybody else get any questions? Would you see any hands? Anybody in the room? No. Okay, can we agree the committee action as outlined on page 15? Is that agreed? Agreed. Moving on to agenda item 5, revenue monitoring report as at the 10 and 7 3, update financial forecast for the financial year. 57, 76, and the committee action is outlined on page 60. Neil?
Thanks, Chair. There have been a number of things that go through here that have just been discussed or have certainly been covered in the previous paper. It really positive position we're in 22-23 compared to where we expected to be. Not necessarily where we would have been in COVID hadn't happened, but in relation to our financial position generally. So if I just go through the main points, which are in pages 58 and 59, there is an impact in terms of the national appeal award, which, as I said before, will be compounded. It will be more of an impact in 2024. That was mitigated for SPT by the fact that we had more vacancies than we would have liked, to be truthful, which meant that we had overall a forecasting underspend of £500,000. Second thing in there is that we did make provision for inflation in 22-23, which is catches the tail end of 22-23 and it's going to be a full impact in 2024. So it's significantly less than we anticipated, and that's a saving of around about £2 million. For example, that 142% increase in cost contracts that I referred to in the previous operations committee, most of that, I think it's about 80% of that, 90% of that is in 23-24, not 22-23. But we're moving into a period, as the previous paper referred to, where it's going to be a significant impact. The third thing, again, I'll not over-egg it, the survey patronage, excellent recovery, an excellent recovery in income. That's really the core to where we are in the financial position this year. So we're forecasting at this point an increase in survey income of £4.2 million. Now, actually, last week is the best week we've had since COVID. So we might even outperform that between now and the year. So we're in a really strong position there. And the last thing in terms of the bullets there on pages 50 and 59, as I referenced in the previous paper, interest received, very welcome mitigation, a big change in interest rates with the changes in base rates. I know that's difficult across society, but for us in our position, being a net cash holder at this point in time, that's given us about £42.2 million in the year. So overall, that gives us a significant forecast underspend, but I think I need to go back to the context of the budget when we were sitting here a year ago. We were still in the period of the Omicron variant of COVID, so our forecasts around about survey income were cautious and pretty prudent. Because of that, to balance the budget last year, what we did was we removed the planned contribution to the survey fund, just over £5 million. We had to take a pen to that effectively to give ourselves a balanced budget. We're now in a positive position and we want to reinstate that contribution to survey funds as part of the long-term plan and as part of the long-term financial strategy just considered. So it's proposed to reinstate that. And it's noted in the previous paper that we talked about the Transport Future Investment Fund. We're proposing to contribute £2 million to that fund this year, and the reason for that is, as well, we referenced in the previous paper, we're referring to the known costs to deliver measures related to Transport Act, and we also want to deliver measures related to SDVR2. So there are significant challenges there. £2 million would take it up to a £12 million reserve, which we expect to draw on through the period of the long-term financial strategy. We may well have to contribute further to that during that period, the long-term financial strategy, because there's a lot of things on the list that we need to address. And finally, again, as referred to in the previous paper, £15 million of capital funding will not support the amount of projects we're currently planning across the strategy. They are not with double-digit inflation, and certainly not with, and this is a key factor for us, not with Victoria infrastructure and subway. That infrastructure requires investment always on an ongoing basis. So it's proposed to support that investment with a contribution to the survey infrastructure fund of £2.5 million. So with a very positive position and income in some of the cost mitigations we've had, and with those proposals to make the contributions or reinstate the contribution to the survey fund, add to the future transport investment funds to get it towards the level we believe it needs to be, and support survey infrastructure because it's an ongoing demand on us. That will lead us to a close to a balanced position for the event, and we'll manage that and make sure we manage that in the end, however that develops between now and then. So, Chair, if I can ask the committee to approve the committee actions, which is in section 4, and I'd be happy to take questions on item 3 and so on.
Thanks, Neil. Any questions or comments? We just one quick comment we mentioned before, but I think it's worth repeating. Obviously, the organisation has done extremely well to reinstate figures in relation to the survey.
Yeah,
You know, which is obviously, you know, we've managed to kind of create the confidence that's needed for members of the public to come back and use public transport. It would be good to see that replicated in other modes of transport right across the west of Scotland. But it's good to see that, you know, where we are involved directly, we're doing the job that we've got on that. Anybody else got any questions, comments? No, okay, can we agree the committee action, which is on page 60, that agreed? Agreed. Moving on to agenda item 6, capital programme monitoring and proposed amendment report as at December January 2023, 10. That's dated 17th, number 6, and the action is outlined on page 80. And it's Neil again.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If we can first of all look at table 3, which is at the bottom of page 78. So this is the starting position for today's committee, and you'll see that survey organisation, the forecast outcome for the year is matched with available funding. For general capital, as we do have an overcommitment there, a planned overcommitment, so of £3.451 million or 17%. We then look at the actual spend today for the year, which is in section 4. The spend is 12.2 million against that phase budget of 15.2. So we can see some significant slippage there. And also got to note that as ever the case for a single year capital funding, and I know I say that every committee, but it's really important, we have a hockey stick effect, so we've got a significant amount of spend above the last quarter of the year. So there remains risks there. Section 5 notes the proposed amendments in the detail in appendix 2. So we'll get 30 proposed amendments and a reduction in surplus modernisation of just under 10.4 million and a 3.4 million reduction in general capital. Those both relate to the slippage that I referred to, you know, that you can see in the actual spend for the year. The impact of these amendments, along with some related funding adjustments, which are shown in table 4, leave us with a position for survey modernisation. We were still matching the planned expenditure for the available funding. For general capital, we're swinging very close to the available funding, so we're now in a position of an objective overcommitment of variance of £371,000 or 2%. I think it is important to note that there's a significant amount of projects in our programme and lots of partnership work and lots of work with local authorities. So whilst for this slippage there's also a lot of it. There are a substantial amount of projects which are being brought up in line with available funding, and we will work to make sure that between now and the year end we do that exactly, we match the programme expenditure to the available funding. So Chair, if I can ask the committee to approve the various actions which in section 6, and again happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Neil. Any questions or comments? Just if I can, obviously, Neil, just the general statement you're picking up from all authorities is obviously anecdotally different pressures of councils are having in terms of maybe setting up a particular project ready to go, and there's a difficulty in terms of the contracts because of resources in terms of material and just the general price of projects. Just again, the pressures of local government as well. So as you say, there's a lot getting delivered, but there's a lot more that we'd like to see get delivered. And there's a reason why that. I think it's all, sometimes quite important, especially in councils as well, when some people may see, slippage and money sitting there. And whilst there's certain projects people would like to see get done in on respective authority, there's reasons behind that. And sometimes whilst it might be a lot of money sitting there, it can indicate a false economy in terms of how healthy the budget is actually, in terms of actually taking on big projects.
Yeah, if I can answer, we are not alone, and I don't mean we're just not alone in terms of the West of Scotland or the public sector. I can't remember the percentage, but the latest figures I saw, I think it was from the Bank of England, on the amount of construction projects that are believed in the UK. It's really, really significant. There are more delayed than are not delayed.
Kirsty, hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to be pedantic, but It's Christy. I just want to ask, and this is probably a very simple or basic question, but it seems that there's just a bit of movement in terms of unspent and therefore some funding moving around rather than big impacts in terms of a reduction. But I just wanted to ask, will there be any impact in terms of projects which can be delivered as a result of the decrease in funding or the moving around of funding?
Thanks, Chair. That's a difficult to answer. Difficult question to answer in an absolute. With the projects which are in our programme at the moment, which are in the 22-23 programme, a well of slippage, we have accommodated them where expected in the 23-24 programme. What I can't say is, particularly with our partners and local authorities, I can't say whether the pipeline projects is affected by that, whether they know that they've got projects which are then delayed in 23-24 and have not then made requests for other projects because of that. So I can't give you an absolute. There's nothing from our programme which we're currently funding which we are not then able to accommodate in 23-24. But there might have been just pressures which meant that because people knew the workload that they've got, that they didn't bring forth other potential projects.
Okay, Chrissy.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay, then we agree that committee action which is on page 18. Okay, thanks.
Great.
Moving on to agenda item 7, post capital plan 23-24 and 25-26, new capital budget 23-24, 107 to 136. That's committee action 110. Deal.
Thanks, Chair. If we can first of all look at the proposals at the top of page 108. Just to point out that all projects through the SPT capital programme are assessed against the RPS objectives as laid out there. But they are, it's fundamental part of managing a capital programme. They're also assessed for deliverability and in the context of the overall available funding. So category 1 projects which are deemed as category 1 are ready for delivery in year 1 of the programme. Category 2 projects are equally supported, but they may not be ready for delivery or maybe a requirement for some match funding. So I think it's just important to just highlight that that's position. That category 2 is a part of the programme which is the delivery, which is affecting the categorisation. In terms of the funding, core funding, as we've talked about already, for general capital, it's staying steady at 15.327 million. And as I said before, that's been challenged with delivering that wide programme in a period of high inflation. For subway modernisation, and you see at the top of page 109, again as I noted in the previous paper, the phasing from government has changed, still within the 246 million support. And it does mean that there's more of a package in terms of supporting subway modernisation for 23-24. Those elements, those straws were there for that reason. It's just the timing of the draw which is different. So the proposed programme is summarised in table 1. Subway modernisation continued to progress with a budget match funding of £25.5 million. General capital planned over commitment again starting the year, as we generally do, 4.32 million, to allow for slippage in a programme the size it is and the variability it's got, or 19%, and that's against a general capital budget of 26.6 million. And so there's a lot of detail in the appendices here, Chair, I'm going around about specific projects, but the general position is that subway modernisation continues, and the planned rate general capital continues, but it's constrained, particularly by inflation. But we have put together a programme which is similar in size and scale to the current programme. So if I ask the committee to approve the action in section 7, and again, happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Neil. Any questions or comments? No indications on screen. None in the room. Okay, can we agree that committee action as outlined on page 110? Great. Moving agenda item 8, Clyde Metro 1378142, and committee action is outlined in 139. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just an update on the Clyde Metro. I usually take it to appendix 1, which is the network diagram, which just to put that in. Really important to emphasise, as Chancellor Scott done, that SDPR2 document is indicative, but it shows the level of extent and ambition of the Clyde Metro. And sometimes I think it's, when we talked about it previously, it seemed like an abstract concept. But that map, I think, shows, yes, we've got a well-established public transport network in the west of Scotland, but the Metro hopefully will take it to the next level. Obviously, the routes and all the other things in there will be subject to business case development processes, but really important to emphasise that's the scale of ambition, even though it may be indicative. And also important to emphasise, Chair, just in section 2.3, the Metro doesn't cover the whole of the SPT area, and just to absolutely reassure those councils, particularly Ayrshire and Clyde and Highland View, SPT will continue to ensure try and improve connections across those areas to the Metro, to the central conurbation, as much as we've done in the past, and that is something we're absolutely 100% focused on. In terms of where we are currently with Clyde Metros, we're still working with Transport Scotland City Council and ourselves developing this case for investment. We've got our programme steering group, which is the senior level officers meeting in March, and that will outline the next stages of development. But the key thing, Chair, is we're awaiting confirmation from Transport Scotland on the budget for that process. The case for investment is likely to take 24 months, but we're told that will come out through the SPPR2 delivery plan. I think it's going to be called the Scottish Transport Investment Programme, hopefully early in 2023. So obviously we keep you posted on that. Now, a lot of this is talking about long term in the future. We are keen, with partners and SPT are keen to make sure that they make demonstrable progress. So a wee piece of what we've been doing internally is trying to identify any potential quick wins that we could do, or some preparatory work preparing for the scale of ambition of the Clyde Metro. You can see section 3.3 there with flagged subway street interchange. It's highlighted in the network diagram how we can improve integration between subway and rail, which should also emphasise as well. Not just subway and rail at West Street interchange, but also cycle very close to the South City Way cycle route, good opportunity there. Master plans, Shields Road and Bridge Street, huge opportunity there, potentially Buchanan bus station as well, and also keeping an eye on the longer term and how we can fund the Metro, perhaps looking at land value capture. We are, and we have been asked by the partner authorities in the Metro project to assist in looking at the next steps in terms of access to Glasgow Airport, and that's at an early stage. Also important to note, Chair, is we are talking to the partners of co-location of some officers for doing the case for investment between the partners, and that's something that's ongoing at the current time. There are, as Liam said in the capital programme, really good selection of projects there, and we're trying to drive into ourselves and the councils opportunities for integration. So there may be projects or work streams through the capital programme, through the RTS, for example, the Strathclyde regional bus strategy, which we'll come on to a bit. Integration with other projects really important. So this paper, Chair, really hopefully emphasises progress is ongoing. Yes, we'll wait for confirmation of budget, the SPT, trying to show that leadership, trying to get those quick wins, preparatory work done to make sure that Clyde Metro becomes a reality as soon as possible. And we had just to finish with a really good session on the Clyde Metro, our members engagement session last Friday, and we'll hopefully try and do more of those as time goes on, just so we can dig a wee bit deeper into perhaps some of the issues around the Metro. We'll keep you updated just to go the whole, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce. Any questions, comments? Yeah. Good.
Just actually to repeat that map is subject to positive change and what people look at that map and just think that's what's going to happen. So it's just to repeat what Bruce has intimated, this positive change.
Volume, yeah.
Yeah, hi there. It's just to kind of re-emphasise the fact that you know, I mean, I understand this is very Glasgow centric as such, you know, but it is really important for you know, I'm speaking on behalf of Argyll and Bute here, but you know, there's that Ayrshire corridor as well, but more importantly here, it's you know, it's our residents getting from Gourock you know, to maybe Glasgow Central or you know, bus and train stations, and then being able to facilitate the Glasgow metro system. We're just seeing a diluted train service now from Gourock to Glasgow Central, which is now just taking longer and longer. But you know, it needs to work for all of us as such. Thank you.
Invite Kirsty, and then we'll let you come back in. Okay, Kirsty?
Oh, apologies. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask about some of the additional projects that SPT's identified in that there could be potential scope to look at in the shorter term, the West Street interchange, for example, Shields Road, Park and Ride. And I just suppose I was curious to know a little bit more about the process for kind of exploring those options and the timelines and what opportunity the wider partnership will have in terms of kind of scrutinising or being involved in that. Thank you.
Do any additional question, Bruce? Reassurance, more specific.
Yeah, no, I think just the case for simple point about the extent of this project, the need for us to take a genuine regional approach. And you know, over the years of history tells us SPT has worked as closely with the Ayrshire councils, Aberdales and Macleod, Argyll and Bute, as much as we've done with others, and that's something that drives us. The region is a success on the basis of, partially on the basis of its extensive transport network, and we want to make sure that everybody gets a benefit from the Clyde Metro. It's going to be a significant investment over the next 30 years, which usually most of you do that. Just pausing on this, a real issue, and one of the reasons why we want to undertake a very quick wins and preparatory work is people are looking out the window or going out on travelling on the trains, or on the bus and see the reality in public transport, you know, services being cut, you know, services being withdrawn, and then you have us talking about this future aspiration about a wider network. We need to close that gap. We need to make sure that people are seeing demonstrable progress, whether it's on bus, whether it's on train, as you're saying. We need to make sure that that's a reality. It's something that Gordon and Stephen and Anthony and all of us involved in this work are really trying to do. We're trying to bring those closer together so people can see improvements now and still be aware that we are looking at the long term. Just in terms of councillor Mearns, absolutely, they are at a very early stage. We've had some initial discussions around PBS, master plan. We've done a piece of work on that. The other ones around the subway, very early stages at the moment, and obviously as time goes on, we'll be bringing the updates to you should any work take place that's required to update you on. And in terms of engagement, we'll be doing what we need to do as far as those projects are concerned. And I think it's fair to say, Chair, I mean, that is an exciting time. You know, Western Scotland won out of the SPPR to be the best project, be Clyde Metro, and we want to make sure that we capitalise on that as much as possible and align, as I said earlier, align whatever we do with the Metro, with what Anthony's doing with subway modernisation, with what others are doing in terms of active travel, bus, etc. That'll be a hugely important part of it. So rest assured we'll keep you updated as time goes on.
Okay, I know there's a few flashing thumbs up with William there, so I think he's happy with that response. Kirsty, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's reassuring. I suppose the only other thing that was relevant to that for me was the budget available to start those to start some more of those streams. of work, and whether there is budget in place currently to do that, or if we're still waiting, if this is just a very pre early stage, or whether we can actually start to really get moving with it.
Okay, Ed?
Yeah, I just last week I did attend the session on the RTS, which was very informative. And there was one area which I was not all that familiar with, was raised about a project that had been discussed in the past, Crossrail for Glasgow, and it was a linkage. I didn't know much about it. I got some information from other members there and did some research. And to me, it was a very quick win scenario of joining or having access between the north side of the Clyde, the northwest, let's say. I mean, I'm down in Helensburgh, and many's the time we want to linkage into Glasgow Airport or linkage into, you know, the Inverclyde area, and that to me was a very quick win scenario. Obviously big capital investment, but giving that linkage between the north and the south side of the Clyde. Now, William's mentioned there about the issues of Gourock and such like in terms of transportation. Helensburgh and Lowland and all that area, we are on the Clyde pretty well. So therefore we would like to see, I know you said that Argyll and Bute would be an area where there's no direct connection in the minute with a big map and such like, but I'd like to see how that kind of area is going to really be addressed as we go forward.
Bruce, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just very briefly for Councillor Mearns, in terms of the quick wins that Bruce referred to, yes, there is budget 23-24 revenue budget to take these proposals, take them into something which is firm, which can then be delivered, which would then come to the capital programme. But yes.
Bruce?
Yeah, just to in terms of Ed's point about Crossrail, it's most certainly fed into the Clyde Metro process and bring the right. Yesterday, the team with Gordon did a really good session with the SPT consultants. I think it's fair to say they opened the bonnet and some of the work that they've done on Clyde Metro. We could see more of the detail in terms of the routes, in terms of the opportunities for use of existing infrastructure that's already there. So absolutely reassure you that the ideas and concepts such as this Crossrail will form a part of the considerations as we move on. In terms of the connections to Helensburgh, the Ayrshires and Inverclyde, absolutely. I think it's safe to say that whenever we present an update in Clyde Metro to a future committee, we will be providing an update what's going on in Ayrshire and the other areas as well. We will absolutely all be there and day out. And there are opportunities coming through. For example, North Ayrshire Council are doing an islands connectivity plan. And we're in close contact with the officers of North Ayrshire to see how we can help and assist in that regard. So we are making sure that we're keeping the whole region happy as much as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Ed, you still got your hand up and fast that, as they call it, a legacy hand? Is that a combination of mute and a legacy hand? I suppose mute and legacy hand. Yeah, that's us. Okay. No other questions, comments? If not, can we agree to action as on page 139? Is that great? Agreed. Moving on to agenda item 9, strategic issues update for SPT pages 143 to 150, and the committee action is outlined in 149. Bruce, make sure you take a breath in between some of the projects.
Thanks, Chair. This is the usual kind of strategic issues update a lot in here, so just to the key points. Obviously, as I said earlier, impact of COVID, cost of living, various other things has still been huge on the public transport market, particularly. Really glad to be able to say, as you heard earlier, in some ways one of the positives I know is that the numbers very much going back. Key thing for the bus, if you turn page 144, top of page 144, is the withdrawal of the bus support grant funding for operators around about spring 2023. Yet to see the full impact of that. Gordon's team very closely monitoring any impacts of that as far as the services in the west of Scotland go. But really the last line of that top part paragraph is probably the most important with there. We've advised Transport Scotland that any expectation that SPT is resourced to fill any gaps beyond current developments is not realistic without additional funding. So we will not be picking up the tab for operators performing their services. It's a huge challenge, and again it feeds into what we're going to talk about, the strategic regional bus strategy, very similar to the metro situation. The SRBS, which was updated the last committee, will look at the long term. We are dealing with a 60-year decline in bus patronage. It's really kind of peaked over the last few years because of COVID. That's not something that's going to be easy to turn around. But also, we are facing these immediate problems, these immediate issues. I know that's something Valerie, the chair, in regular contact with Transport Scotland and the Minister about, and we have the opportunity, I think, to put forward some short-term options for that. Just in terms of the strategic regional bus strategy, we are going to scope in that. We're hoping that ready for April. We will provide a thorough update just to reassure Councillor Nairns the strategy and programmes meeting in May. And what I would highlight is just in terms of the SRBS, really important to remember. You put the link out here. There is no guidance, there is no regulations. No one else is doing this work in Scotland apart from the SPT. We are pushing forward with this and to be able to look at things such as the provisions of the 2019 Act without having guidance and regulations for them is hugely challenging. Hence why we're spending a bit of time scoping that out and looking at the totality of what we need to do there. So a lot coming forward over the next few months. Our focus at the local obviously is getting the regional transport strategy done, but the focus will be on the SRBS as that scoping work comes to a conclusion round about May. Just in terms of the rest of the report, National Planning Framework came out, hugely important as well. That's the planning equivalent of the SDPR2. Some really positive things in there for the west of Scotland, as you can see at the top of page 145. Perhaps a surprising one for this chair. We listened to the Regional Transport Partnership by surprise when aware of this actually going on, but you can see 3.2.3 Scottish Parliament's Zero Committee did a report on local government cross-sector partners financing and delivering Net Zero Scotland. That quote, the paragraph at the bottom of the page there, is taken from the report. Really supportive of RTPs. We should be more empowered, we should be resourced, but also it does issue a challenge for RTPs to be high profile, more transparent and more responsive organisations with clearer process for public engagement. We take that in the chin. Really the important thing is to await the Scottish Government's response to that and to see what their view is on it, and that will come in due course. We'll advise you of that. Just on page 146, the last paragraph of that section, though, just to highlight to members over a couple of weeks ago, you'll remember me talking previously about the roles and responsibilities work that we did as part of the National Transport Strategy. What flowed from that was put into a transport governance group. We were advised by Transport Scotland that group is which I sat with a colleague from Trans in Aberdeen. That group has now been paused, so Transport Scotland paused work on that, and that's something that we're reflecting on now as we look at what we put in the RTS for the partnership in March. 3.2.4, the Fair Fares Review. We are working closely with Transport Scotland. They actually set up a special meeting with SPT Civil Service to talk that through, and we're in the process of coming up with some potential ideas for them for the west of Scotland about initiatives which could take place in our area. We're doing that over the next couple of weeks. We've also got an update in there, Chair, just on the wider fare situation. I think it's fair to say that the public transport industry has really come together to try to do its bit for the cost of living crisis, closing fares across the board, particularly our subway fares, which you'll be aware of. but also would like to look at socially necessary bus services, rail and ferry fares. So that's something that the industry is very much trying to play its part in helping hard-pressed families across the west of Scotland. Three ports, yeah, you might have seen this in the news. The Glasgow City Region bid was unsuccessful, and that was something we had supported. And I know the City Region guys and dialogue with the Scottish Government will happen next, and that's a big project to get that proposal together. In terms of the regional transport strategy, as I say, 3.3.1, we're going to bring that to the partnership in March. Just the flight plan there, Chair, 3.3.2, we're aware through the officers at flight plan, and due to the tiles, key members of staff, there is a kind of review being undertaken of that, and a good meeting with the head of the management team, the councils for flight plan, and we've agreed to work together as much as we can and show our support for the need for the strategic development plan and process in the west of Scotland. We did a meeting here on Monday, which I hope to attend. Bus Partnership Fund, the network study we're doing, which will form a real key part of our bus strategies we take forward. That's ongoing with the City Region, Glasgow City Region to do the City Council, the Glasgow Bus Partnership, and that's something we're fully involved in. And then just lastly, we've got an update on Northern Transport Interchange there, Chair. We have had updates on that before, but it's just to say one of the things we're going to be driving for strategy programmes from now on will be a more detailed project update on some of our key projects, really to emphasise that SPT and the councils are delivering as much as we can for the rest of Scotland. Some of this is unseen. If it's not in your particular area, we will just add a wee bit to that. So quite a lot in there to understand. Just asking to go get forward and avail some answer any questions.
Quite a lot in there, Bruce, as always. If I can use as Valerie just in particular in relation to the first part, obviously there's more in jobs that the chair is engaged, you know, in terms of the concerns of the organisation, in terms of funding, which is pretty imminent in relation to March this year. And I know we're desperately trying to seek a meeting with Transport Scotland and the Transport Minister on a number of issues, but specifically on the most immediate, as well as the regulatory side of things we spoke about before this one. Val, if you can maybe give an update anyway.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to advise, there was in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chairs, we wrote to, or the Chair wrote to the Transport Minister, just outlining concerns about what will happen once funding is ceased at the end of March in terms of COVID support, the network support grant plus the response has been positive, and we're seeking to arrange a meeting with the Minister, the Chair, myself, the Minister and the Chief Executive of Transport Scotland. As soon as we've had that meeting, we'll be able to put the partnership forward as to what that outcome of that meeting is actually comes about.
Thanks, Valerie. And just the quick one before I open it up, it's just the comment in relation to page 145, in terms of the transport report, which I understand, Bruce, that didn't necessarily involve any prompting in any way, shape or form from this organisation, but in terms of the observations from them, I don't think many people around here online who decided with the outcome. So a positive outcome there, although we were not necessarily directly involved in steering that. Okay, Christy.
Thank you, Chair. Just as an aside, I would just say it's a wee bit difficult to hear the conversation. So just to flag that in case that it's possible to have, you know, mics moving for future meetings. I don't know, just particularly for those that need to attend online. It's interesting actually as an experience to be online today, because it's a wee bit tricky to hear all the good conversation that's going on. But I just wanted to ask about the regional bus strategy, and just for I was hoping that we'd have a little bit more information at this stage on that, given that it was nearly a year ago that was first brought to the partnership. And I mean, it was my understanding, I think, that there would be a public consultation on that, or that we would have potentially a strategy in place, but a finalised strategy in place by now. So if it is possible to provide any further clarity on the timelines for that and when we will have that strategy approved, that would be really helpful. And then just on the fair fares, there's so many streams of good work happening at the moment, but just specifically on that, I believe that the officers will be putting forward their recommendations when that work concludes. And I just wanted to ask, would it be possible for the wider partnership to have some input into that before final recommendations are submitted, given the wide interest that there is within the wider partnership on that and other things. Thank you.
Chris. Thanks, Chair. Just to be absolutely clear, we came forward with the proposal for the regional bus strategy in November last year. That's when it came to the end of November. That's when we first put forward the detail of that, and helpfully, actually, Neil, in one of his papers, has provided a bit of detail just for those who want to look at page 37 of the papers. It's the table from a report back then showing the detail of the proposed strategic regional bus strategy, the structure and content. There is an awful lot in there in terms of strategic framework, technical minimal service framework, service quality framework, fare ticketing policy, and all those other parts, not least, as I mentioned earlier on, Chair, the operating and funding model. The time that we've spent over the last few months has been really trying to explore more of what has been done elsewhere. As I said in the update, the biggest challenge for us is at the moment sticking on the neck out of this without guidance and regulations for us to follow. So we want to make sure that we're being as helpful to Transport Scotland and seeing how we could use some of the act potentially as again subject to due process, but also ensuring clarity, transparency and a robust process are in place. So that's really been the focus for us. We now are working with we'll be working with the consultants trying to scope out the detail of that. Again, very challenging when you don't have guidance and regulations. There's some elements of this, and that will give us the detail. We did say back in the report to the SPT in November that we'd be hopeful to do that within 12 months, subject to further project scoping, and that's what we're hoping over the next month or so. As I say, the end of April, we'll have that further detail of what that scope will look like, and any updated timelines we need to give you there. We would want to raise unrealistic expectations. As Neil mentioned earlier on, we're talking about the Future Transport Investment Fund. This is the potential to cost significant amount of money. If we do decide to pursue some of these options, we want to make sure that we get the early stages as right as we possibly can, so we're not regretting that later on in the process. So absolutely assure Councillor Mearns that as we go through this, the partnership committee, elected members will be very much involved in it. And similarly to the input to the Fair Fares review, the members' engagement sessions that we've had so far in preparation for the regional transport strategy on governance, on the metro, the strategic regional bus strategy, hugely helpful for me and guiding the team and what the partnership are expecting. Hopefully it's been useful for elected members, and we will be looking to do one next week. I can include the Fair Fares review in that and some of the ideas that we are talking about, and happy to discuss those in more detail with members then. Thank you.
This is okay.
Thank you, Chair. That's helpful, and apologies for misreading the report and the November. The mixing up the regional transport strategy and the regional bus strategy. I do appreciate that it's not been as long as a year since you first brought that forward. So apologies for that mistake there, and thank you for the update.
Okay, William.
Yeah, hi there. It's just the fair fares review and public transport fares. I mean, I get rail fares, I get the subway, and I get ferries. They're all you know, moving forward and whatever. I mean, if you are meeting the minister, I mean, obviously bus transport absolutely scares me. I mean, I was looking on page 50, which was the long-term financial forecast summary, and it, you know, indicated subway income, you know, rising from about 19 million to 20, virtually 26 million in 2031 to 32. But when you have a look at bus income, I mean, honestly, it just doesn't move, you know. So my question is, if you are meeting the minister, there has to be some form of you know, specific fares for bus transport, as in, you know, I know we've talked about this before, like a monthly special, you know, maybe even 3 monthly. I'm just so keen to get people back on buses, but it, you know, if we don't really do something radical, it's just going to be, I don't know. I really don't know. Sorry.
If it gives you any comfort, William, you're not alone. That's as far as the comfort goes. Look at Gordon, Dixon, to my right. Who wants to follow right? Gordon.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Sinclair. Maybe just the highlights we touched on the network support grant plus scheme that's been in place as a deal in respect to fares, we understand. Profit sharing mechanism that finishes at the end of March. The reason I'm highlighting that is we expect fare increases on bus following that we expect that to follow, which I think might be a very point. You know, it's concerning given the situation that we face, given the fares that are currently in circulation. And so just to pick up that point, I'm sure the chair will be picking up in due course.
Yeah, I appreciate, obviously, in terms of the conversation and operations, you know, in terms of relation to the costs, there's roughly circa around 200 contracts that SPT is involved. You said before, vary between 4% and 70%. The services the rest of Scotland, depending on where you are. But the key thing is that there was approximately just was it eight contracts that came up for renewal there, with an increase in terms of cost to this organisation of 142%. Yeah, you know, what way you look at it, ain't pretty on that side of things in terms of the services out there, the numbers, the commercial market, and our ability as the public body of transport in the West of Scotland, and our ability to kind of try and be the safety net. There's a limit to everything, you know, in terms of what we can do under the current setup. Anybody else? Anybody else want to comment? No? Okay, thanks. So that is committee actions outlined on page 149. Can we agree that? Okay, so we go to agenda item 10, active travel. Progress update is page 151-176. Action is page 154. And as Bruce.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Just very briefly, we update now to the travel, quite a lot of you on there. We did a response to the Transport Scotland cycle framework on the plan for active travel. That's at Appendix 1. Section 3.3, work's ongoing. Good progress made actually on the regional active travel strategy. In line with the RTS, working with Clyde Plan, Sustrans and the other guys. And delighted to say we've got a new active travel officer that's joined us, and that's been hugely useful in progressing some of this work. In fact, one of the first things I did share was delegate to her responsibility to attend the Sustainable Travel Stations project mentioned in 3.4. This is something being led by John Lord of Sustrans with secondment. Scotland's Railway looking at improving pedestrian and cycle access to stations. Work's ongoing in that regard. He's come towards the end of it. A real strong role for RTPs, I think, in the future in that. But money will come from, etc. That's not to be worked out. But it's been a really good process, and I think it's been really useful from what John said. about raising the profile of the need to be integrated between the railway, whether it's active travel or public transport, hugely important. So hopefully progress made in that regard. Regional active travel grants, we've done a lot of power work in that over the last few months. I think mentioned before, we managed to secure £585,000 for councils this year through the regional active travel grant. That's directly between SPT and Transport Scotland. We'll work with Sir Stratton Ed. That's just a direct relationship between the RTPs and Transport Scotland. We'll be working with councils there, working with us, and then we've got future bids coming in for 23-24. You can see those just listed at the bottom of page 153. Quite strong bids for next year. We're hopeful to ramp that up as time goes on, Chair. We have put in a bid to just at the top of page 154, Active Travel Transformation Fund, a bid for £150,000 to other improvements across our network within our control, the subway, bus stations, etc. We've got work to do on that once we get notice whether we'll be successful or not. And again, just to finish, really important to emphasise, Chair, ongoing investment in active travel through the capital programme, and how much that has increased over recent years to be one of the most dominant parts of our capital programme is invested in active travel. So a lot going on there, Chair, and keep you posted as work goes on. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bruce, and it's good to hear that the integration is now back into tracking. Any questions or comments? David?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. At my full council meeting yesterday, active travel was discussed, and it was very much the mood of the members that they wanted to see quite an emphasis on walking as active travel. They felt that the cycling lobby had taken over active travel up to the detriment of walking, and the point was made very clearly: more people walk than cycle. It's a general. Yes, thank you.
Want to take Christy first, and then
Yeah.
Christy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general, I suppose, a general question or comment. I know that the in Glasgow, for example, in the council, there's a bit of difficulty in terms of recruiting the number of staff and teams that are required to be scaled up in order to meet the objectives of active travel strategies and the city network, and that funding is an issue in terms of being only provided with a year of funding rather than a longer term funding package to enable better planning and to take forward that work more quickly. So I suppose it was just a general question about the funding that the SPT has in order to really accelerate this work, and whether you're quite content with the mechanisms in place in order to scale up that work as quickly as possible when it comes to staff, increasing staff, teams, and in terms of funding available. If any insight could be shared on that, it would be quite helpful. Thank you.
Before Bruce comes in, I just know through talking to colleagues and also the budget process and budget process in relation to local authorities on the way just now, and given that the areas where council need to make the savings, that the focus proportionally is focused on one or two areas, because obviously you've got the statutory areas. So areas of like transport and transport officer within local authorities, the proportion, the percentage in terms of increase is huge and significant. So in many cases, not necessarily in all, but I'm kind of getting the feeling that when it's an easy hit, and in some cases it's an only hit. So it's not a negative impact. And it kind of goes back to the point I think there's been a conversation earlier on in rolling projects and relative councils, and therefore a knock-on effect in terms of slippage and that side of things. But Bruce, a place to be.
Yeah. Just on the back of David has mentioned in relation to walking, I would be glad to support of cycling and walking for years. But I think it would be good if the cycling lobby could make sure that the members stay on the pavements and make walkers safe. Because we're really want cars on the cycle paths, which should endanger cyclists. So it's also true that cyclists are endangering walkers in relation to what they do.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
assist on that. Thank you.
Good point. Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just the point that the councillor Robson are making, I think it's something that as time moves on, and the massive increase in active travel funding that we're going to see from Transport Scotland over the next few years. Remember, they're putting their budget up to 10% of the total budget, so it'll be £320 million a year by 24-25, that'll be increasing. So I think as that gets delivered, I'll go back to the resources and the implications of that in a moment. The potential for conflict there with pedestrians, walkers, other public transport modes and private cars is absolutely huge. And how that nut is going to be cracked, I'm not sure at the moment, but it will have to be a focus and attention. I know from the feedback that we've had in terms of, as you say, Councillor Doran, cyclists using the pavement, some of these other cyclists perhaps ignoring one-way signs and red lights, etc. All of that creates an atmosphere of conflict which is not healthy for the transport network. So I think for all of its councils included, SPT2, just being hugely mindful of that and taking forward any of these projects is going to have to be essential to it. Just the point of walking, I think there was a big emphasis on how there were more people during the lockdown were walking and cycling. That's been carried on post-lockdown for cycling, but not so much for walking. And I think that's something that again, we'll reflect on. And John Lauder, when he was doing the accessible access to, or sustainable access to stations work, really kind of emphasised the safe walking routes, well lit, good pavements, etc. Is going to be a huge thing in the future. So really mindful of that, and as I say, the ongoing conflict. In terms of Councillor Mayor's point, resourcing up for this is going to be a huge challenge. I think we were very fortunate. We did our recruitment for the active travel officer. I think it got somewhere 15 applications. Some very good candidates. We get the best obviously, but there's good candidates out there. If you need the job attractive, if you can be clear with what you're trying to do, you've got a clear role for the active travel officer there in terms of taking forward the regional active travel strategy, trying to look at this in an integrated and coordinated way, and making sure that projects are getting delivered. But it's a problem again. We talked previously about the bus industry's issues and recruiting drivers. Ultimately, the same for active travel to get something for us to look at. In terms of concerns with the funding for active travel, that is one area where we're not concerned. I mean, I think it's got up to 320 million in 24-25. I think that's around about £80 million now. So I think, given the fact that we've been able to secure quite a lot of funding through the regional active travel and through the capital programme, we're in a good place. We are in dialogue with Transport Scotland and others about how that future money, the 320 million, gets done divvied out. Transport Scotland are very keen on a form of regional model. We are a regional model, so that dialogue is ongoing to make sure that money, most money possible, comes to the west of Scotland. It's done in a strategic and coordinated way as possible, and making sure that councils and others can deliver on that funding will be hugely important for the credibility of taking active travel forward. That's Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. Christine's your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come very briefly back in, that'd be much appreciated. I suppose just to reiterate the issues that exist in local authorities, for example, in Glasgow, which obviously I know specifically about. But the money is there, it's available, but the councils aren't Glasgow is not able to spend that money in the most effective way at the moment because it's unable to scale up teams, departments, bring in the necessary skills. And you know, there's a huge kind of increase required, and a lack of ability, I suppose, in the short term to make that happen. So it's just, you know, to be mindful of how we get over that and what role SPT can play to help resolve that, because it does seem to be quite a major issue, and it does seem to potentially negatively impact the scale and the speed at which we can build the active travel networks that we require. And I just wanted to just make another quick point about the pit cyclists on pavements and things, and totally accept that pedestrians and walking must be as prioritised as cycling. I think in Glasgow and in SPT we have, you know, tried quite hard to make that, to create that parity. But I suppose for me the focus should be on improving active travel infrastructure in order to get cyclists off the pavements, for example, because it currently is just not safe to cycle. So I think, just in the spirit of you know, working together and constructiveness, the focus should be on improving active travel infrastructure, and that's how we resolve the problems, rather than demonising cyclists. I'm not suggesting that anybody is doing that, but that was just my reflection on some of the comments that were made just now.
So just, yeah, absolutely a huge advocate of active travel, introducing infrastructure, scars my back for cycle lanes in Eastern Berkshire. Unfortunately, yeah, one or two issues on that front, as has been the case in other places. But what I would say is, on the 2 points that you made in relation to staff and the staff within local government, along with SPT working together, the key thing is this is quite frankly, and this, you know, I think it's quite a common overview contribution, particularly within the leaders within COSLA, regardless of political colour, that investment in local government needs to be better. And if you don't have the investment and the resources, then the issue of that expertise is either lost or projects just snarl up and end up on the shelf or that dust garment. But until we address the funding set up for local government, then I think we're going to have a particular problem over the coming years. And that one, anybody else wish to come in? No? Okay. Thanks for that. So can we agree that committee action outlined in page 154? And moving on to the last agenda item, agenda item 11. Anthony, it's a Brinkwood, Depot, Garchnack and Civil Works. It's committee action is outlined in 178. Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. Keep this brief. I'm looking for approval for £433,000 in order to amalgamate construction for 3 packages of work at Brinkwood Depot. First is replacement of embedded rails and fuel roads at the maintenance shed entrance. The second is changes to the track layout and geometry on the bridge that spans the system entrance ramps. And the third is the establishment of 4 mini platforms and safe walking routes around 14 metres from the maintenance shed entrance. This is to allow drivers safe access to pick up trains once we're into UTO in the future. 5 organisations were invited to tender. 2 chose to do so, and I'm looking to approve the award to Amalgamated Construction.
Thanks, Anthony. Any questions or comments to this report? Don't see anything online, don't see anything in the room. So can we agree the committee action as in line 178? Is that agreed? Okay, that concludes the business for today. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Well, thanks, Chair.
Thank you.